Indian English fiction started its largest trail in Kerala, India of course, and in Kerala by Arundhati Roy's Booker winner, The God of Small Things. On the trail of it came a few books which we all saw, very familiar places, very familiar incidents, very familiar storylines, but written in English. And I think one of the first was Jayashree Mishra's uh, Ancient Promises. I think Karthika, you were one of the first of the publishers to pick up writers from regional stories written in English. So I believe you can give more light on, place more light on how this all started. Writing from a regional language, regional region into English.
So I don't think that's actually accurate. I had a wonderful publisher called David Davidar, who was very, very far-sighted about everything, including what to publish far ahead of time. And one of the things he did was to publish O.V. Vijayan. My first understanding of editing translations came with working with O.V. himself. He was very involved in the translation. And it was that early struggle of doing books which had no ready audience. Nobody was actually reading in translation in English very seriously. But O.V. took it very seriously. So every word was examined, every sentence was quarreled over. And finally, he became the flag bearer of Malayalam translation into English. The Legends of Kazakh is possibly the one book that stood out in that time as a masterpiece in an Indian language that had to be read by everybody. I remember Rag Darbari in Hindi was another of those early books that were really popular and spoken about. So yes, Penguin did do a lot of translations, though there were other publishers. Minnie Krishnan was building a series of translations. She's probably one of the pioneers in that. There was a small publishing house called Katha, which did volumes of prize stories. My first reading of N.S. Madhavan came from a story that won a Katha prize and was translated into English. So I think that in the late 90s, that introduction was happening, the seeding was going on of translations into English, and the market was small, but there was a great deal of commitment to a fairly political act of translating Indian writing into English. And Arundhati Roy is like the parallel wave that then kind of swept everything in front of it. So should I stop now and we'll maybe go back to that later?
I believe I was actually referring to original writing in English. Again, coming back to O.V. Vijayan's translation, I've always heard that, I think he himself translated it, right?
He translated Kazakh, but not the other books.
No.
The others had other translators.
And O.V. Vijayan did not match his original was what the comment was. I mean, it still stays, the comment still stays. Because I think we had another translation of Kazakh after that.
No, I don't think
No?
there's been, no, I don't think so.
I believe there was some talk about it, but it didn't happen.
It didn't happen, yeah.
So I think I'll have to stay with you for the next question.
Okay.
I would like you to give, a narrative of how you found the new writers, especially Jayashree. I think you started with Jayashree.
Yeah, so
Jayashree
it was
Mishra.
actually a very, the Arundhati Roy phenomenon meant that we got a lot of manuscripts which are set in Kerala. Like immediately it was a flavor of the season. We'd get very mediocre manuscripts, but we'd get a covering letter that said, this is like The God of Small Things. This is set in Kerala. And so we were all supposed to get very excited about this and want to immediately publish it. But we were very cautious. Ancient Promises by Jayashree was a really, really strong novel. It was set in Kerala, but I think the theme was very, very much more than the setting. It was about a mother who has a child who's not, as they called, normal in those days, and the struggle and the marriage that falls apart because of it, etc. So it was a story for everybody. But because it was set in Kerala and it had the same agent, David Godwin, as Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, it came with a bigger lot of hype than other books did. And then I think there were a lot of manuscripts that did get published because of that Kerala connection. but it was a passing phase. After that, it was about the books themselves. Kerala or not didn't matter. And one by one, I think books started to appear. So many writers in fiction, including, say, Manu Joseph. And now I think we are in a place where there's a lot of translations, there's a lot of original writing, but non-fiction, say Manu Pillai's non-fiction, has taken over in terms of popularity from fiction, and it's become a far more balanced sort of field. That's my sense of it.
So Sabin, I'll come to you next. Your books have been here for a while now, a couple of years now, and your next books are coming in. And I believe you are getting into translations, right? A number of, so Polandine patti parayirudhu ennanengilum Polandine patti parayam.
Of course, you should talk about Poland. Yeah, yeah. You want me to say? Yeah. Okay. So I'm so glad that this is my first one. A lot of tears and hard work. A lot of rejections gone into it. But before I talk about Poland, I want to say a small incident, and I'm sure Karthika must have forgotten it. It was when the Kovalam Lit Fest happened at Kovalam. I know this. So I mean, the Arundhati Roy phenomena also, touched me kind of. So I also wanted to write the novel in Kerala. So I started writing, and I got a manuscript finally. I was noise. There's a lot of now if I look at it, a lot of mistakes, and So then I knew that Karthika is coming to Kovalam. So I went there because I knew Binu. I went there and waited for her. When she was rushing out, I gave this manuscript. Please take it. She took it and ran and got into a car. I don't know what happened. So it's good. It's a good. And I also want to say she's going to be taking my next novel. So it's a kind of a small world, and I'm so happy. And it's kind of I don't know. This is really, I feel so good. Okay, now coming to Poland. This little book is getting published in Poland, in Polish this March. So I remember when we started this festival in 2018. I didn't have any book, but the manuscript was ready, and I found myself in a little space to read something from the manuscript because I really wanted to be a writer. The overriding passion is to become a writer. So let's talk about Poland then.
So it's 5 years have passed. So Saharu, let's start the Ki Jagavadam then. We were listening to Saharu in a book talk with Prem Panikar in the morning. So he gave out all his secrets about the book. So I'm going to pick on the right ones and talk again. So Saharu's book. Saharu, pusthakam undo avide kaanikke. It's called The Story of an Hour and a Half. Sorry. Huh? Chronicle of an Hour and a Half. You should hold it. It is a fantastic debut novel. The sort of book that you don't really read these days. I will not give out much myself. I'll leave Saharu to say more about the book. So how did the book happen? Let's start from there.
Well, the book happened the way books happen.
Writing
itself. What specifically?
The writing of the book. I mean, you come upon the writing at some point, right?
Yeah.
Why did you write that book? What was your inspiration to write that book?
Well, I was writing love letters to my girlfriend. That's how I started, writing English. I'm a Malayalam medium guy. I learned the language along the way. I'm a late learner. I was saying, I often tell this to Karthika that I told my girlfriend, India is a very chaotic country. And she said, what does that mean? I said, I don't know. It's a lot of disorder. And she said, it's not chaotic, it's chaotic. So that poor I was. I'm not, as I said there, I'm not a very programmatic writer. I don't deal in political compulsions or moral clarity or philosophical insight. I keep my faith in what Wallace Stevens, in his, he's a poet, of course, but there's a non-fiction book of essays that he has written. And the first title of the first essay was The Noble Rider and the Sound of Words, in which he says that there is a difference between thinking in poetry and thinking through poetry. And he obviously preferring the first. and second as rather inspirational. Um, this is what I also keep as my own credo, that you have to think in story, not in opinions, not in relevance, because relevance is a very relevant word so far as literature is concerned. Any story written well reflects a human condition, and human condition is the subject matter of the fiction writing, and relevance has very little to offer a perspective to it. So I write for the sake of writing. It is, strictly speaking, I wake up, I write. I don't, you know, I don't decide that today I'm going to write this sort of a sentence or that sort of a character. It's much more hard work. It's also deeply hurtful as it is entertaining, because writers are, I don't know writers. I'm the only writer I know. But writers are very cruel people, ought to be very cruel people, turning always the mirror onto themselves. And you become, you study the caricature you have become. Because the society demands you to be a caricature of yourself. Society doesn't want you to be honest. Society wants you to be fictional. And as I said there, that when I write, I decide that this is one thing that I do, that you have to lower the characters to a realm where they are more naked and less fictional than they might be in real life. Because I think real life is more fictional than fiction.
How much of that have you employed, that philosophy have you employed in this book?
It's very difficult to employ philosophies in books. books don't behave the way we plan it out. I do have a clear narrative arc. I don't want to find myself at 75th or 150th page that I have no direction to go. I do have a clear narrative arc. I do have a clear problem, a situation. I do have also the larger and the minor characters. I don't worry about a lot of what to write. I worry that I have to get this sentence right. That this sentence has to look like I wrote it. That if somebody comes across my book and there is no name of me on the spine, that book still ought to be recognized as mine, just as I recognize my favorite writers. So that's how it is.
I'm trying to provoke you. You understand that perfectly.
You don't ask me why I write in English, not Malayalam.
No, my question is this. Why did you choose this particular topic? I think you should explain what your story is about. Yeah.
Everything I do and write, my mother has a central influence in my life, because I have seen that my mother lived a life not for herself but for others. And I think most women are compelled to live the lives of others. And one of the way to dismiss that all sacrifice is to idolize it. Say that this is the ideal maternal affection, that I would put up a photograph every birthday with her, or celebrate Mother's Day on. In order to look at your mother in the true sense of who we are in our house, is to also understand human tragedy, which is almost always somebody has to bear it. And mother is the representative of, this human catastrophe that we are seeing, especially family, which has to be built on her head. And if she sings everything. So there's a lot of responsibility, motherhood. So one of I think both mothers in the novel are not very happy mothers. They're not even sure that they really love these kids. They say that, you happen to, the more you go on, you learn to love. But this was not the original experience, that as you go along, like in a love affair, you are stunned by somebody, you talk, then it becomes a little less bare, even more less bare as you go along. Then we get to a point where these people are far too ordinary. They're exceptionally ordinary, which is why we don't interpret our lovers. The moment we interpret them, the moment we subject them to the same standards that we apply to others, these lovers, these very special creatures, come out as extraordinarily ordinary.
Karthika, small town tales are the flavor these days. We get a lot of very interesting small town tales. We are moving away from urban pictures and words. So, what would you say about, like, what sort of stories are happening these days in publishing?
Since this panel is really about writing Kerala, I'm going to say that this is very true of the manuscripts and novels that are coming in from writers who are writing about Kerala. There seems to be this confidence to say that while earlier a lot of the fiction that was set in Kerala sought to exoticize Kerala a little bit, there was always exotic fish being cooked in banana leaves. Yes, there was always that. There was always this thing about, the Hindu, Muslim, Christian population in Kerala makes it such a peaceful, secular place. I think there was less nuance than this attempt to showcase Kerala, which maybe they did it also because a lot of writers in English, perhaps consciously or unconsciously, seek an international audience. So there's also that, so much feeds into it. Tourism, what Kerala became in that God's own country mode, what people sought to see of Kerala, the beaches, the sunshine, the food, as I said. Then a writer like Anis Salim comes along and writes in English, but writes very particular stories, writes about places that he knows really well, not so much known to the world outside Kerala, but he makes the novels work as novels. He tells stories that are very hyper-local sometimes, but are capable of being interpreted and read by anybody anywhere. So I think one by one, these writers made the difference. And I see Saharu as a kind of, if you read Kazakh in the English or in Malayalam, whatever, but you knew it was a small place with a very large mythology that was being built, right? So when Sabin and Saharu write about one place and they start building on it to tell more and more stories of that one place, I feel like there's an opportunity here to make Kerala much more rich, much more detailed, much more real to readers anywhere. And in the sense of becoming more and more local, they also end up becoming more and more global. And that's really what I think we're able to achieve now with these stories.
Sabin, Karthika spoke about Varkala and Anis. And your story is also placed in Varkala, one of them. One you took off to the Gulf. Okay. So let's hear about what sort of Varkala did you place after Anis had built it. Since your family, there should be some connection too.
Yeah, we are cousins, so yeah. I have no. The Varkala that Anis sees is I can't go and find it. He's changed the geography, changed the roads, and changed everything. But this beautiful writing. So the Varkala that I describe in cliffhangers is the cliff and around. The popular Varkala cliff and the four boys, Muslim boys, or the four boys carrying Muslim names, rather put it that way. So that's their story. The cliff has a different culture. They're international tourists, and there is a road, and behind that road is a different culture. Traditional people, traditional Muslims and Christians. There is a layer. Two layers of two different cultures. So that's what I'm trying to present, and the helplessness of four boys who carry Muslim names and they are caught in between the saffron and the green. Yes, it is political. It is a story of identity, but it is at the same time it's a small town story.
Saru, your case is slightly different. Your Arikod is known to be a place of, what is that he said? Ulleg was saying a particular place of many opportunities, a place of many stories, Arikoda. Your story is placed in Arikoda, your native place is Arikoda. So tell us about Arikoda and the Arikoda in your book.
Arikoda in any place that you render, once you render that into a book, behaves very differently. It's not incumbent upon the author to provide an accurate representation. It's not important. I can change it. I can place Calicut and I can create my own road where a murder happened. So this kind of honesty is of no use. You do not have to accurately present a city as it is. There is a creative road to take where you can largely base a story on a particular town without necessarily getting the, details very accurate. So Sabin was saying Anis Salim does that. That Anis Salim Varkala is nowhere to be found because that's exactly how it works. I mean, if you go to Mississippi, you wouldn't find a place where Faulkner explained. Or if you go to Bronx, that's not really the Lilo Bronx that we have read. It's very different. Aricot is a town, small town, 30 kilometers from Calicut, and yeah, it's a very literate town. It's, I think, the one of the most literate grammar panchayats in Kerala. It also has a high government employment rate. So most of the people around me are government employees. I don't know how it happened. I think largely because the Salafi, the Mujahid, the Wahhabi incursion, they created educational, they are religious wise, they are very exclusionary, etc. But because, a lot of the common syncretic festivals have now died away because of the advent of Wahhabism. Like Nurchas, Kondoti Nurcha, which used to be, for example, a multi-religious festival, now is not in existence anymore. But Wahhabis also, along with their radical conservatism, brought in some change in the way education works, where women were allowed to go to schools, which are actively discouraged by Sunnis. And they also opened a lot of educational institutions. So in Aricot is largely, a Wahhabi town with a lot of educational institutions. And education is the only positive byproduct of Wahhabism.
But your story is about a rumor and how it disturbs lives, isn't it? So tell us about the story. I've been trying to make you get to the story. You're running away from it.
She has an eye on me. Don't get into stories, she said.
So you have to read this book because from page 1 onwards, you live in horror of what might be. Now, if he starts telling you what might be, whether it happens or does not happen, it'll ruin the book. So.
No, the idea is this, that I will tell you something about rumor. So, rumor is nothing very peculiar to our age. Almost all communal rights in Kerala were, in India were products of rumor. I mean, all the blood libel stories of Jewish children, Jews killing Christian children and drinking their blood and making mouth sauce out of it, they are all rumors. Rumors have always been there. What has changed is the scale and pace. Because of the dependence on social media, which has amplified, we are addicted to our communication. And this is the so I only see WhatsApp as something that has, made you over communicate things. So people get interested and people spend a lot of time. I also think that people are hardly able to disconnect the internet. Even if you are reading, you are always checking the internet, checking what has come, even though nothing has come. So this endless dream of, of going and checking in, seeing whether somebody has messaged me in the last 5 minutes is a curiosity too universal to blame on, a small town people.
So how does it become your story?
Well, as I told, I was trying to figure out, Kerala's sexual repression.
Just,
I mean,
just give us a short summary of, a teaser of the story.
Well, her control,
She won't look at
her
you.
control.
No spoilers, just say.
Okay, so what happens is that there is an extramarital affair, and the news spreads, and things escalate. That's it.
That's
And
all.
the thing is that the narrative is narrated by 15 or 16 characters. It used to be more, but then it came down. So it's from multiple perspective, and each character. So my focus is, again, this is one important part of me, that when I write, I don't particularly focus on the victim. So the victim of the novel is hardly important. You don't hear about him much. And he is not also, so the novel is explored through lives dependent on him, his death, especially the mother and the mistress, and the onlookers and those who, kya ho raha hai, chalo, chalo, ja.
Then it becomes a mob thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how a mob is formed, yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted you to say, because that describes Kerala now. When you say right Kerala,
No,
Kerala is a part of a mob now. We are different mobs together. I mean, not in all aspects, but in some at least. So when we say right Kerala, your version has come in at the right time, where we are using social media to turn things from one side to the other. I believe there was another book that came recently in Right Kerala, and I can add that, Arvind Jain's book, Teenage Couple Having Fun Outdoors. That was about an intimate video of a private intimate video of a couple, a teenage couple, going viral, and what happens to them and their family and their neighbors when this video is accessed by everybody. I mean, you know, the middle class shame that goes into anything that goes viral. Whether if it's positive, it's very positive. It goes beyond positive. It's negative. It goes under the earth. So I think those sort of stories are coming out a lot now.
Yeah.
Karthika, can you add?
Yeah, so I'm just, when I read Saharu's manuscript and subsequently sort of worked through it, it kept feeling like one of the Malayalam movies that we are watching these days. You know, the kind of mood that is evoked. So in my great optimism, I wrote off to Fahad Fasil and said, you have to read this book, give me a quote for the cover. Because it is like your work and so on. He ignored me, that's a different matter. But that's the kind of storytelling it is, where I think a lot of India is now waking up to Malayalam cinema, of this new wave Malayalam cinema, where we get the story, the mood, the music, technically it's so strong and effective. And I think the new writing that is happening in Kerala in terms of
It's very
fiction
visual,
actually
very visual.
goes with that kind of trend of storytelling. And they should be playing off each other, and each should be benefiting the other, because I think what they have to say about Kerala is precisely what you're saying. The violence, the changing face of religious plurality and communal plurality, it's all there in the cinema that we're watching now. What was that wonderful movie where, the social media movie, you know, where he takes a video of a guy who's sleeping on a train, and then it goes viral, and he says, "Kallu kudichu kadakkaana ennu parnittu endoru adu cheyille." Pinne,
Not sure.
what was that movie?
Vikriti. Vikriti, I think.
Vikriti, correct. So that is very much like your Arvind Jain's novel, where a video makes life-changing like difference to
There is
everybody.
Chapa Kurusha before that.
Oh, there
Chapa
was.
Kurusha was the first
Correct.
one. Yeah.
So it's very much about what is happening now. And the novels are now beginning to talk about what is happening now. So I think in that sense, writing from Kerala is always going to be a little bit ahead of writing from perhaps other languages and regions in India.
Sabin, but your second book took off from Kerala to Keralites in the Gulf. So we have had other versions of white collar workers in the Gulf, but yours was about a journalist, which is unusual in English language at least. A Malayali journalist in the Gulf and his various, despondencies. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I took it. My second novel, Shamal Days, I set it in the Middle East in a newsroom, two newsrooms in fact. The protagonist is Malayali, obviously, Abbas, and it tells a story, many stories of expatriates in the Gulf. I lived there for quite a few years, and I know it myself, and the aspirations, the frustrations, and when I used to have Africans, Scots and Welsh as my colleagues. When as Saharu said, I've studied all way in Malayalam medium, and when I landed there, I couldn't even understand their accent and their, it was horrifying for me. Then we have to survive, So then I started observing people around me, Arabs, and I knew there was a story. I will write a book out of these people. So that's what Shama. But then quintessentially, the protagonist is Malayali, so it's his loneliness, and it's a rather character study of a novel. You know.
When you're writing Kerala, you have one big back, what do you say, one negative happening because your books can be translated into any other language but Malayalam, and it needs a very clever translator to put into place. I speak from experience because I started upon Deepak Unnikrishnan's Temporary People and I gave up halfway. I apologized and said I cannot do this any further. I believe it's coming out, but. So, how do you think your books will look into Malayalam? Getting it. Sir, you can say first.
Me? My mother is now proud, and if that's translated, my mother would be kicking me out of the house. So that's the difference. It's very safe in English.
Do you want to prove it by reading a bit of your book?
My mother is not my literary subject. Nobody. It's also people talk about experience. I find it really funny because authors must be the people with the least experience of the world because most of the time you are just staring at a blank screen hoping that it will improve at the 5th hour. I don't know. Also this idea of relevance, that the discussion, whole discussion somehow is steering towards the relevance of, the social media, etc. I sincerely don't believe that relevance has any relevance in literature. That any story written well is a good story. It does not have to prove anything. It does not have to be useful to you. It speaks to human condition and satisfying your curiosity about human condition itself is the purpose and end of literature. It doesn't have to serve political purpose. It's an invention by social scientists. There is a scholar, Philip Rafe, he is a forgotten scholar. He wrote a book called The Mind of Freud, The Mind of the Moralist. It's a very useful book. Nobody reads him anymore. I think he was husband of Susan Sontag, so she also supposedly co-authored it, but he did not acknowledge it probably. Something of the sort. But he said that the central thesis of his book was that you should approach Freud not as a scientist of the mind, but as someone who delves into the deep phantasm of human mind. And sexuality becomes an instrument to upset us. And he says that Freud, in effect, by the corpus of his, creates a morality without religion. It's kind of an irreligious morality that he's preaching. There's a great United States jurist, Wendell Holmes Jr. in 1904, I think, in Northern Security case. He said that great cases make bad law. In fact, I think great literature also make very bad laws. And that's an aspiration. So I will read out, I know you are bored, but let me read out some 2-3 paragraphs.
You are whetting their appetite, so you better read.
Okay. So it's about it's the mother. She's talking about herself, how she ended up here. They married me off across the river on a bright summer day in late May 1986. The water used to be much cleaner then, and on a clear 14th night you could see the flawless dunes of white sand and little shadows of orange chromaids, and garfish and schools of Jan Danios as they swam, dimpling the surface in their trail. In deep summer the river used to shrink, bearing the undulant sand dunes. As evening approached, they filled up with picnickers and spotters and hawkers. Kids ran with paper kites or traced iron fillings in the sands with bits of magnet wrapped in bits of paper. At dusk, just as the calls for Maghrib prayers rose from all the mosques in and around the town and from the villages beyond the river, a thousand bats took flight from the dense palms along the banks in waves against the late colors of the sun. It was at this time of the year that the nomads with their obscure tongues and acrobatic children used to put up their canvas tents on the sands and set up their great circus, and the nights were great fun. Then my parents married me off. They came to my home on a boat, the groom and his aunties and uncles and the men from his village, and I went with them down the stairs into the river, across the river on the same boat that brought them, and trucked 4 kilometers up the trails towards his home under the harsh blue sky and the white glaring sun, through the coconut hills and paddy fields and sesame fields and granite quarries and cashew orchards with their pungent red fruits, canopies of teaks with meandering trails flanked by wild pineapples redder than red roses, and streams with boulders as old as the earth, with water clear as glass, infested with water spiders and trout still and pensive as hermits, black as rocks. Even then I was confused, walking with my groom who wore a white mundu and white polyester shirt with a plaited handkerchief tucked under its collar, fairer, older, a good 2 feet taller, yet somehow slower than me. Even then I was confused about this strange man, my life to come, the responsibility of having to give birth to children soon, and the liability of having to love them more than myself because I was merely 19. I wasn't finished loving myself enough. I married him because he was 14 years older than me, and that single factor slashed the dowry by more than half, and that was not a deal my father could have rejected, even though he had no job. My husband got so late to marry because he was so lazy to marry. When my father asked him about his job, he said he would look for one with a kind of burdened assurance, and my father agreed. He agreed because I had 4 younger sisters, waiting for their turn with all their burden of dowries and brown skins. Then I was pregnant each year, a ritual much like Ramzan, and each child was like a bomb, an explosion of confusion. I didn't even know that I had any part in it. The children were just coming out of me despite myself, as if my body were growing new limbs without my own consent. And by the time I grew aware, the house was full of their hungry noise, like a few eternally whistling pressure cookers, and I lay sleeplessly beside my husband, who couldn't get it up on the bed, not anymore.
Sabin, I think in your case, the translation is slightly, I mean, it's not that difficult because your stories are closer and it actually keeps a little above the surface, so it doesn't create any problem, isn't it? But I think you should read from that, since he read about the Ramzan, I want you to read about that plurality thing, that paragraph. And would you just mention the context before that?
Yeah, as I said, this is the story about 4 boys, and a lot of things happen. You know, they are not religious, so they don't conform to the faith, so they get in a lot of trouble. So this is when during Ramadan, a lot of things happen. So I'm going to read 2 paragraphs or 2-3 paragraphs, and that's it. Ramadan splits our house into two. Ramadan splits our house into two, those who fast and the one who doesn't. It is the same at Taha's, Jahangir's, and Usman's. We are the Kafirs. We are the Kafirs. Before Vivekananda died, our breakfast and meals were at his house, but now with him gone, we have no option but to go to Pidambaran's tea shop. Sitting around a table, we are all praised for the pluralism in the country. We love its democracy, which gives us the freedom to eat and drink in public during Ramadan, which according to father and my brothers is not possible in the Gulf. You wouldn't find even a single restaurant serving food during the day, father said. And if the shurta, the police, sees you eating in public, you will be arrested. Just hearing how the state controls the individual freedom makes my blood boil. Oh, here also. Yep. And I don't want to go there. You never know when I would flout the rule eating a shawarma during Ramadan. We go back to Pidambaran's tea shop for lunch, as well as going home for a nap. We then get up an hour before iftar, ignoring the arthritic pain in her knees. Mother stands by the stove preparing snacks. The mouth-watering aroma of deep-fried snacks permeates the whole house. My mother doesn't allow me to eat before the azan. Some days, father also gets into the kitchen and makes some Middle Eastern delicacies such as falafel and koftas. It is a rare sight to see them standing side by side in the kitchen. In spite of the short-lived peace, father keeps an eye on mother just to make sure she doesn't suddenly pour hot oil on his head. A week into Ramadan, I was accosted at home by a few men who belonged to a reformist Islamic group. Musa, we need to talk to you, one of them said, a well-built man in his early 30s. Mother was praying. Father was in his room. Tell me, I said in a hurry to send them away before mother whispered the angels on both her shoulders, winding up the namaz. You cannot eat at a restaurant during daytime in Ramadan, the man said. Father, poor soul, looked at me helplessly. What's your problem? I said softly. You are insulting the deen and all of us, the man said. It's none of your business, I said. Yes, it is definitely our business to make sure that all members of the deen obey what the faith calls for. Let's see then.
I think I'll have one final question to Karthika before I open it to the audience. Karthika, what would you look for in stories from Kerala in the publishing aspect?
I don't think it would be any different from stories from anywhere, because if a work of fiction or non-fiction has to work, it has to work as something that is almost agnostic of place, right? So, but because I'm from Kerala, because I enjoy personally listening and wanting to know more, I think what I would look for is stories outside of the mainstream. I mean, Arikod is a place that I had not read about. Varkala came alive on the page very differently. Otherwise, it was always, the main cities that we read about. So I would love to be able to read more about villages and towns that are not so well written about. But I think another thing that is happening is also a lot of writing about Keralites outside Kerala. One of the novels by Mohandan Sir, Delhi, that was a really powerful evocation of Malayalis living somewhere else. And I think that is a huge reality for Kerala. A lot of us have dear ones living somewhere else. And like Benjamin's Goat Days or other novels like yours, I think there's a lot to be done about telling stories from elsewhere. And that is something, again, that I would really, really like to know more about.
How about our histories?
Are you talking about historical fiction? Yes, but the manuscripts we've got so far have been so limited. I think the kind of research that needs to go into writing really good historical fiction, that we are not yet seeing. But yes, if it was going to come our way, I know all of us would be very excited about publishing it.
Hi, I wanted to ask the authors if you write in English because you prefer distance, because both of you come from Malayalam medium schools and Malayalam is the language you grew up on. So, is it because you need a distance from writing what you know so well, or do you need a distance to convey the essence of it, to be objective, or like?
You are better equipped to answer it.
I don't know. I grew up in a world of books. My father and mother, they've done English literature, even though I've gone to a Malayalam medium school. But then I couldn't write, I couldn't speak. But then this aspiration, as you said, Anis is my cousin, and Anis is the one who gave me first the book of V.S. Naipaul. I still remember he said, "It's good, but you must read this." And first time I saw V.S. Naipaul, okay, I took it home and started to read. This kind of, then the aspiration to write in English. Not because I was too immature to think of getting closer or being distant or anything. Just want to write a novel, or write like Naipaul, sorry. So that kind of aspiration was there. Then we built on it and wanted to write, and it was for me it's a struggle to write a first line of prose, But then, like writing, and magic happens. It's how it started. So.
Hi, what's your name? Okay, no, thank you for the question. So, you are asking why you chose to write in a language that is not your mother tongue? Is that your question? I think you do anything. I mean, Aricode is also a it's a big football town. It's very, very famous in the state for football. So, just like somebody imitates Messi, you also started imitating fox you see on the shells, and you ended up learning this language and ended up learning this craft. You saw that they were doing it in a certain way. They were not doing grammatical stuff. There was no conservative clarity that become vogue these days in their sentences. None of that. And they were not preachy. And I thought that our post-colonial fiction is extremely political, I think. And that burden of politics limits their capacity to invest in human condition, which it does not easily give away to perpetrator-victim narrative. Why I wrote in English? Well, English language literature came to me through English language. My Malayalam is also very weak. I mean, I don't read a lot in Malayalam. I don't read actually a lot. All that I read was in 20s. Most of the time I'm rereading books that I read in 20s. I'm not endlessly reading. I manage some 40, 50 pages a day, but that's nothing new. The new books that I read are largely non-fiction books, because I think that I got a good kick out of already the available books in my shelves, that I can't take it anymore. Yeah, but English also I find very resourceful as a language. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Shakespeare fan. So there's a word called Baudelaire, which is the worshipping of Shakespeare. I would comfortably worship Shakespeare than Allah or anybody else. And Shakespeare wrote in 22,000 words. And the next competitor of having used the most number of words, different words in his corpus, is Racine, a French writer, playwright, who used 6,000 different words. Now there is a difference between 22,000 and 6,000 words runner-up. Shakespeare teaches you to think in language, much like Whitman does, Walt Whitman. Yes, a song of myself. Basically, by naming the thing comes to life. Name the leaf acquires a life. Yeah, so yeah.
Congratulations to both of you on publishing your books.
Published 5 years ago.
Yeah, I understand you are the debut novel writer. Okay. Yeah, so do you have any specific advice for any aspiring writers who are also wishing to write about their narratives of Kerala?
Okay, nothing specific about Kerala, but I think the first instinct, if you develop a desire to become a writer, abide by the first instinct to stop trying. Stop trying for 10 years. And then the work is not stopping. Still you want to write, then follow the urge. Writing is, I don't know, there's a lot of romanticization around writers. I don't know. Sabin is the second writer I know. But writing is hard work. It's a product of habit. Everything that you worth living for and dying for is a product of habit. And you have to spend 6-8 hours a day, if you can. And you must be prepared to look at the blank screen, even if nothing happens to you for 6 months, which is what I do. There is no easy way to anything, I think. I mean, carpentry is difficult, writing is difficult. It's just another profession. Yeah.
I'll say writing is a painstakingly lonely affair. You go through a lot of emotions. You don't know whether it will ever get published. I got a lot of rejections and I was about to give up. Then, I'm sorry to quote Anis again, he once told me, I told Anis, I'm stopping, I can't take these rejections anymore. He said, no, tenacity is a virtue. Persevere and tenacity is a virtue. And this year I'll have 2 more books coming out. Tenacity is a virtue. But it's a bloody lonely affair, It's not, you got to be like a marathon runner. There'll be mid-marathon crisis. You don't know where the novel is going. You're getting bored. So it's, hang in there. That's all I can say.
since both of them have made it sound so difficult and like you really don't want to write a book ever in your life, let me just add that both of them have also brought something to the world that is enriching all of their readers, right? So as I said, hang in there, not just that it's hard, but that finally the reward for it hopefully is well worth it and you must stay with it.
I mean, I started submitting, in 2008 or 9, and I was just learning the language even then. Until 2019, for a long time, I wrote poetry. And my rejections would, if you count, run up to 700 or 800. A rejection is the most, I don't feel rejected, if I propose to a girl says, no, you are not good looking, you are rejected. I wouldn't feel upset. Publishing, venturing into writing teaches you to take rejection very, very lightly.
My specific question is to Sabin. I'm invited as a speaker just to be on the panel with someone. And I walk in here, I'm fully under the stars. I see all stars. I told Georgie yesterday that I wanted to meet a lot of these literary giants of mine. I happened to sit there almost asphyxiated. I'm a doctor, so pardon me for the medical terms. So I'll tell you about how I read Sabin's book. I was on way to Varkala for a family holiday, and I usually choose one of my old Marquez favorite books. And Georgie at Mathrubhumi, I know Karthika knows him well. He's my librarian. So when I go, I make sure that I call him, and he knows my taste pretty well. And he gave me Rodrigo Garcia's Farewell to Gabo and Mercedes. And I took it for reading at Varkala. As I'm billing, he gives me cliffhangers, and he tells me, finish Varkala, come back and write a review for the book. He said he's my colleague. Okay, and I had actually forgotten about this book. It was there in my bag. I was so enthralled by Rodrigo Garcia, my Marquez memories and things like that. When I came back, I read that, and when I met him today morning, I was actually clicking photographs of Marquez as a caricature there. So this is a very small world. That's what I meant to say. And Sabin's book, what I told him, I have not met him before, I just met him here, was I felt the breeze of Varkala again from the cliff where I was staying. So literature actually gets you very, very close. And about Westland, I was somebody who was taking off all the books from Mathrubhumi in cartons just before it was, yeah. So, and my boot was full. And when I was trying to take my baksa out, he said, no, I'm putting all of them in this thing. So all the best. Please keep up the brave literature works out. And Saharu, I'm definitely reading your book. I'm wowed by your attitude. Thank you.
The world is kinder than it appears. But I have been a very lucky person. People are kinder. If you give, if you can be kind to yourself also. As we write, we don't have to immediately give up. Even the editors, publishers, all those are very kind people. So you shouldn't be intimidated by the publishing industry or the venture. Yeah, expect people to be kind, because people have a potential to be kind. And certainly writing, when you submit, editors and publishers do understand that there is a lot going on there, because they are editors, they know that what's going on there. So people would be kind to you. Don't worry that somebody might reject you as bad or sentimental. That's not how it works. People always encourage you.